What's an ice wine? What does it take to make an ice wine? What does it take to make a kosher ice wine? These are questions we're going to explore on this 119th episode of the Jewish Drinking Show, bringing L'chaim to life. I am your host, Rabbi Drew Kaplan, and I'm very excited to welcome first-time guest to the show, Rabbi Avraham Gislason. Welcome, Rabbi Gislason.
Thank you so much for having me, Rabbi Drew. So happy to be here.
My absolute pleasure. So I know that Rabbi Gislason is the owner, the vintner of Tzafona, is it winery cellars?
When we started, it was Tzafona Cellars.
Yeah.
Now that we have properties and we're building a winery, so it'll likely change to like Tzafona Estate Winery, something like that. But
okay,
Tzafona Cellars, we'll stick with for now.
Okay, so all right, soon to be. Okay, at an appropriate time. Do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
Sure, no problem. I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, which happens to be probably the city that's made fun of most in pop culture in Canada. Very, very cold place. And in my early 20s, after being in Israel for a while, I moved to Ontario. In Ontario, Thornhill, I have a shul, and I work as a winemaker also. We're in close proximity to the Niagara Peninsula, which is the foremost wine region in Canada,
which is not far from like upstate New York, Finger Lakes. That's another huge.
Exactly. So it's right north of there. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. We're close.
But you're saying for that area, the Niagara piece of it in Ontario, you're saying for Canada, that's huge.
Yeah, it's the number one wine producing region. It's an unbelievable, very special, unique microclimate. It's out of this world.
Wow.
Which we can talk about if you want at some point.
We will. How did you get into winemaking? How did you create stuff? And I assume Tzafona, because that's Hebrew for north, because you're up north in Canada.
You got it.
Okay.
You got it.
All right. So how did you get into vintning, winemaking?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. Like, people ask me this question all the time. And usually my answer is like, I don't know what to tell you. Hashem runs the world. Here I am. Like, a lot of stuff happened. Really. But truthfully, I mean, I always really liked wine. And, maybe you could say I had a nose for wine a little bit. And I started making wine, in my own house, in my garage, homemade wine. And I thought at a certain point, after learning in Kollel for a while, I wanted to kind of move on into business. And so the next step was I opened, could be the first ever anywhere, but certainly the first ever in Canada, Kosher Brew. So it was like a place where people could come and take part in making their own beer or wine. So I started with this, and basically at the same time, I started working at making the Tzafona wines in a winery in Niagara on the Lake. And the path kind of went that we moved more towards the Tzafona wines, and I ended up being done with the Brew.
That's really cool.
That's the progression.
And for a moment, it is really interesting because there are those. I know certainly in America, the brew shops where you can come, it's kind of like home brewing, but in a store.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting to make it a kosher focus. That is really cool.
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun.
And so you, having gone from the sort of the U-brew spot, how did you then make that decision to go off and make Tzafona Cellars?
The original partner that I had in Tzafona, good friend of mine to this day, Toby Burkell. And the two of us, we were very into wine. It really bothered us that we're sitting on this wine region that is, like I'm telling you, this very unique, amazing microclimate. And, it sits, by the way, at the same latitude as like Provence and Chianti and Rioja in Spain, the Washington wine region, the Oregon wine region. And it's a very special spot, but even has more amazing characteristics than
All right, you know what? Fine. I'm going to double click into that. So what is super unique about this microclimate?
Yeah, so first of all, this is something that people don't realize. When you think about the famous wine regions in Europe, right? Like really, a bunch of these regions are right at the same latitude as some of the regions in France and Italy and also in America. That's the first thing that people don't realize. The second thing is we happens to be in the region that we're in over here. It gets very, very hot in the summer. So, for example, our temperature is consistently much higher than it is in Burgundy, for example, right? One of the most famous wine regions in the world. But beyond that, the amazing thing about the Niagara Peninsula, which is why you may see it as like more unique even than like upstate New York, the Finger Lakes, is that why is it called the Niagara Peninsula? It's actually not a peninsula, but it's a piece of land that goes between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie.
Hmm.
So you have these two massive, massive lakes, some of the biggest lakes in the world. And what they do is those lakes,
Cool off.
they store up temperature. They
Oh.
store up, the warmth of the summer, and then that moderates the temperature in the winter, and vice versa. And so what you have is a much more evenly tempered. So you'll often in the wintertime, it'll be 5 to 10 degrees warmer in the Niagara Peninsula than it would be in Toronto, for example, which is amazing. And then beyond that, we have this phenomena called the Niagara Escarpment, which is basically a rock ridge that goes from upstate New York all the way up to, I think, Hudson's Bay. I could be wrong. It goes very far north anyway. And it comes, so the growing region of the Niagara Peninsula is between the Lake Ontario, and the top of the Niagara Escarpment. So what happens is it also traps a lot of the air. So the lake effect warmth will come off the lake and will kind of hit that escarpment and go up and be drawn into this pocket.
Wow.
So you have the Ribono Shalom made this unbelievable spot that shouldn't exist in Canada. That just gives us the ability here. And the soil is this, it's amazing. Different types of soil, a lot of deposits from glacial retreat, It makes I'm telling you, it makes this area that we can grow like, we've grown Cabernet Sauvignon in this area up to 24 bricks, which is, extremely, extremely ripe, like that you normally wouldn't be able to do in Canada.
So I can say this unabashedly and unashamedly. Yeah. What are bricks?
So bricks.
I drink wine. I like drinking wine, but I'm here to learn also.
So we have two things in common for sure.
Yeah. I would say more of a beer and whiskey guy, but as a pluralist, I drink wine too. So
okay, I'm on board. I'm on board. So bricks is the measurement that usually we use for the amount of sugar in the grapes.
Oh, it's like a gravity measure.
It's
like in beer, measuring gravity, how much sugars are present.
Specific gravity. It's another scale of measuring the sugar content. Yeah. So, so just for example, if you had like 24 bricks, you'd be, the alcohol that would be produced out of that would be close to 14%.
Oh, cool.
Which is it's a.
How is it measured? Or it just takes, I imagine it's a sense of gravity, whichever volume you have, and it measures the sugars in it, right?
It's measured with either a hydrometer or with a refractometer.
I had a great time spending it as a scholar in residence in a synagogue in upstate New York just this past Shabbat. I had a great time, did multiple talks. Most of them were paired with tastings. And I realized I can also share that in other synagogues. So feel free to reach out to me about that. Or even like I did last week with a Temple Brotherhood, did an entire evening of tastings and talking. So happy to talk. Happy to chat. You can feel free to reach out to me at drew@joe'sdrinking.com. We can bring l'chaims to life. Now back to the show.
We have like this gem of a region that like doesn't make sense that it exists in Canada, but it does. So we're very thankful for it.
I'm sure the wine people will tell me exactly what's going on, but I think, was it Bordeaux that they have certain ridges or whatever? It's a similar variety of topography that creates some of the special regions, or maybe even microclimates.
Right. Sure. Yeah, in all these wine regions, they have different characteristics that make them amazing. Bordeaux is like the top of the top for big, powerful red wines.
Yeah,
and the full-bodied white Sancerre wine, those types of things. But over there, they have different. There's different within Bordeaux. There's different layouts also, but they have some mountains. It's very hot in Bordeaux. They have palm trees in Bordeaux.
Really?
Yeah.
That's wild.
So you're looking at regions like California and Bordeaux, some places farther south in Italy. That's where you get the really ripe, big, strong red wines. So here,
which brings us back to the bricks measurements.
That's right.
Yeah.
So whereas we're struggling over here and doing all sorts of amazing farming techniques to get our grapes to get to an acceptable level of bricks. Sometimes in places like California, they're overly ripe and they can't ferment them because they're getting up to like 16% alcohol sometimes.
The yeast just can't tolerate it.
Yeah, the more sugar, the more and people don't want to often drink a 15.5% alcohol wine. I mean, depends who the person
Not
is.
us, but okay.
Present company, you and I excluded.
Present, yes. Present company excluded, but some people are not. Okay, that's fair. So so you went from this homebrew shop, but were you aware of this microclimate, that special region, this Niagara Peninsula, and that's what helped inspire you to go into this vintning?
So I was aware of it to a certain extent. I didn't know all these amazing facts that I just told you, but I knew like, we make ice wine. We have some good wines in the region, but there was nothing kosher. There was nothing kosher.
Wait.
Yeah.
First of all, how long ago did you start Tzafona Cellars?
Right. So the first vintage of Tzafona was 2014.
Okay. And prior to that, there had been no kosher runs in
So there had
Toronto?
been, I think, two people made the attempt to make kosher wine in the region, but they didn't make it past 1 year. They tried one vintage, and that's where they stopped.
Wow.
And as far as I know, we're the first company to make kosher wine on an ongoing basis in Canada.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that brings me to my next question about ice wine. So
yeah,
you were incredibly kind to send a few ice wines my way.
Right.
Very excited to share them with a few folks. So let me ask you the next question, since we're talking about kosher wines being produced in Canada, kosher ice wines, or at least kosher-certified ice wines.
Right.
How common is that?
Right. So we're gonna touch on a point that is a little bit of I wouldn't say a sore point, but it's a point that I would like to speak about.
Because that's what we're here for.
Yeah. So there's really only two countries that can reliably make actual ice wine. We'll come back to what actual means. Every year.
That sounds contentious, but okay.
It's contentious. And that is really Canada and Germany. Other countries that have made ice wine real ice wine are like, for example, Austria a little bit. So there's a kosher company called Hafner Wines. They made the first kosher ice wine ever, and they make it every once in a while.
Okay. But not regularly.
Not every vintage, no.
Oh wow.
And they're I think they're in Austria, if I remember correctly, Hafner. And so like this, there are a number of people that make something and they call it ice wine. But the definition of ice wine, according to these governing bodies of Canada, of Germany, of Austria, I think the rules are a little bit less strict in America, but they have some definitions. Are that the grapes have to be left on the vine till they freeze on the vine. In Canada, you have to pick them when it's at least -9 Celsius, which is probably about I don't know, like 15, 20 degrees, something like that, Fahrenheit. Okay. Cold. Well below.
Someone's going to comment anyways and tell us the exact calculation.
Yeah, please,
because the internet. Okay.
Yeah, please let us know. Yeah. Lamaisa, we don't pick them until it's about -12, because that's what we need in order to really produce the wine properly. But then we have to pick it at that temperature, and then it has to be pressed at that temperature. In order so that what happens is like this. Imagine
at that same time you pick them.
Yeah.
I guess you maintain them outside. Do you also crush them outside?
Yeah.
Oh,
so like we have an open area that's covered, but it has to be cold. And what happens is that they're literally like frozen berries of grapes. They're like ice. So you put them in this press, and it's not like the modern wine presses that we use for making table wine. The big stainless steel bladder presses, right? This looks old-fashioned.
Is it wood?
They hold about a ton of grapes, wooden basket with a hydraulic press that comes down, and just very, very high pressure presses it down. And so what happens from that is that the water part, the grape essence, the syrup, the sugar, the flavor, it all has a higher freezing point. And when you press all that, what comes out is really just the essence of the grape. It's thick and it's syrupy and it's very high sugar, very high flavor, concentrated flavors and aromas and everything. And what stays behind in the press is basically the water, still as ice. It's like a solid block of ice. So we extract this like essence of the grape that is so powerful. And we extract it at around, we like to get it around 37.5 bricks, but it's very, 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 very sweet. And that's
You were saying
ice wine
24, you were saying 24 bricks yields about 15.5, 16% ABV.
Yeah.
So this will be higher, like 20 to 25-ish.
It would be. We stop the fermentation when it gets to around 11.5% alcohol. And that leaves a residual sugar of just under 200 grams per liter, which just in layman's terms means you have a nice level of alcohol and significant sweetness still remaining, which
are you
no added sugar.
Are you choosing to do that, the higher sugary, the higher not yet fermented sugar? Are you doing that because of the kosher consumer's palate, which likes to have sweeter things?
No, this is the standard ice wine.
That is the oh, really?
This
okay.
Ice wine, yeah.
It's typically that sweet, but
it's typically a very sweet wine, yeah.
Now, quick question, because I really don't know. What if someone were to actually keep letting it ferment and ferment all the rest of the sugars, or as much as the yeast could handle?
Right. So it would be a high.
It would be beyond the style. It would be outside of the guidelines, I guess.
It doesn't get no one does it. It's interesting that you're not the first person to mention this, and some people have requested that we try to make it. The other thing is that in those who know fermentation science, that level of sugar and alcohol is a very hostile environment for yeast. So it's also
some yeast. Is there some yeast that can tolerate that high amount?
Yeah. No, there are yeast that can tolerate more alcohol, but that together with the level of sugar makes it very, very difficult to ferment. It's not easy to make ice wine. It's quite hard. So it's, I don't know how much further it would go, but maybe we'll do a small batch this year to try it out. Have you ever tried distilling it? I just saw someone ask the question.
Yes. The audience. Have you ever tried distilling it? I mean, that's pretty high gravity.
Yeah, no. So it's interesting. You should know. Spoiler alert, I guess.
Sure.
We are actually distilling some of this. This probably in the next few months, we're going to be distilling some of it.
Getting it ready for Pesach, right?
We're trying a new project here. We're going to see. We're going to see. Great question.
Yeah, you can have brandy for Pesach.
That's right. Yeah. So maybe in Pesach in a few years.
I hope you're enjoying this wine-focused episode of the Jewish Drinking Show. I want to break in and give you a sneak peek into next week's episode, which also features vintners, although this time brothers. Here we go.
I think a strong influence of ours was like just the boutique wine scene in California on the Central Coast is like very, non-traditional, a lot of cool, edgy names. So, it's not something that's atypical for the non-kosher wine scene. When you get like really small wineries, there's some cool, funky, cool names.
I hope you enjoy that sneak peek with the Weiss brothers. And now back into this episode featuring Rabbi Gislason.
There's a number of products out now. For example, there's a number of wineries in Israel that are making what they call ice wine. And what does it mean? It's delicious.
I'm sure it is.
Tell you, it's very good.
But there's no way it gets that cold.
No, they put it in a freezer.
Oh, okay.
They harvest their grapes, probably like a late harvest style, and then they put it in a freezer and press it. So it's like cheating ice wine. I'm sure it's a delicious product. It's tasty. It's yummy. I'm not knocking them, but it's not. And so if you,
it's not to traditional international standards.
They're not allowed to use the words like the German word EISWEIN, ice wine, which is their word. The Canadian word for ice wine is one word, ICEWINE. They don't call it this. It's not real ice wine. So
that would basically leave Tzafona with the only kosher produced ice wine according to international standards in the world.
As far as I know, yes, and Hafner.
Okay.
In
Austria.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we're making it every year. We've made some interesting things also. We made the first ever kosher red ice wine in the world. We made a Cabernet Sauvignon ice wine.
Wow.
We have a Cabernet Franc ice wine coming out. And these vinifera varietal ice wine, Riesling ice wine. It's unbelievable. Wow. But I always like to make that point. There's real authentic ice wine, And then there's people who are making something and calling it similar to ice wine, and I wish them success.
With
but
more liberal standards. Yes.
Yeah. The other thing is that they don't have, which is not to be taken lightly. It doesn't just all of a sudden, get to -12 and we're ready. What happens is they freeze, they thaw, they freeze, they thaw. They experience an extra. We usually are making ice wine in January, so they spend an extra couple months on the vine, and during that time, there's all kinds of other things that what we would say the Ribono Shel Olam does. Other people would say Mother Nature does, right? To the grapes during that time, and it's a whole different experience.
All right. So, granted, I'm not so scientifically inclined, but what does happen? What does happen from when those cold months? I imagine a lot of things could potentially go wrong with those grapes, right? Yeah.
The one good thing is once it gets cold, you lose a lot of disease pressure. There's not a lot of disease. Anything that was, if there was rot, it goes bye-bye, right?
Oh, interesting.
But we do have they started making ice wine in this region, I think, in the 80s. And they basically had to figure out how to do it properly.
You're saying Toronto, not Germany.
Yeah. Yeah. Like in the, and so, they've developed a lot of techniques. We have one of the biggest problems that we have, since you're asking, is birds. Because
wait. Can I go back? I know I want to hear about the birds.
No.
But before the 1980s, was it being done in Canada? It sounds like it was being done in Germany.
Yeah.
Oh, so even before the 80s, it was only done basically Germany.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the wine region in Canada is very young in the Niagara region. They were growing grapes like Concord grapes, grape juice grapes for a long time. And it wasn't until there was a few pioneers that started in the late 70s, early 80s. They were German families, most of them.
Oh, really?
They came there and they settled over here and they said, hey, we can do like we did back home. And they started really, changing the region. So it's a young region, which is one of the challenges that we have. We have to get it known. We have to show people that there's something unique here, which is pretty exciting.
Well, actually, I know we want to talk about the birds, but aside from the ice wines being produced outside of Germany, what else makes it? I know you already talked about the microclimate, but what about the product, the grape products? Is there anything unique? Any particular varietals that do exceedingly well?
There are actually.
Yeah.
I would say let's say in the vinifera grapes, which are, those are like the famous ones, basically. The noble grape varieties, like, the ones that we know, like Chardonnay, Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc, these famous ones. So
we're talking,
in this
those
region,
are whites, right?
Those are whites, yeah. So with regards to whites, Riesling does incredibly here, like fantastic, great Riesling. Wow. Chardonnay does really, really well. And Sauvignon Blanc is okay, but it's a little harder it's not the best in this region, but it's good. So those two grapes really, really shine over here. And in the red grapes, so the grapes that shine in this region are really Pinot Noir, Cabernet Franc grows very, very well. Gamay Noir also, and we can make a decent Cabernet Sauvignon for those people who know the wines of Burgundy and the not gigantic California Bordeaux red wines. We don't make those, but we make beautiful red wines from that also.
Wow. Okay. All right. So going back into the birds after, I apologize for my tangent, but the birds.
No, it's good. Yeah. So this is a big problem because you can imagine when we're harvesting ice wine, the ground is covered in snow. All the vegetation is dead, and there's these big flocks of starlings. I don't know if you know what starlings are. They're those those little black birds that fly in these amazing big flocks in funny shapes. You ever seen them?
Okay.
They're totally amazing and beautiful. But
so they're still hanging around in the winter.
They're around. Yeah.
In the dead of Canadian winter, I should.
Yes.
Okay.
And they're hungry. And there's a whole fields of sweet, delicious grapes sitting there. So we have to, and those gigantic flocks, they can wipe out an entire vineyard in a few days.
Oof.
So
Okay.
we have to have techniques to get rid of them. We have these machines that are propane fired things that make that like bang, loud bangs, like a gun sound almost,
Yeah.
something like that, set up
Yeah.
in the vineyard. We have to surround them with netting.
Netting. Okay. I
Yeah,
was before you said the netting, I was thinking maybe they would be camouflaged beneath the snow, but I guess netting works a lot better.
yeah, and the snow doesn't get that high, so
Okay. Huh.
yeah. So that's one of the
Huh.
main difficulties that we have really
Wow.
is the birds. But
So,
there's a
huh.
couple of grape varieties that are
Mhm,
not vinifera, not the
mhm,
famous ones that are hybrid grape varieties, French hybrid grapes. And
mhm,
one of them is we use a lot because it's an amazing grape.
mhm.
It's called Vidal Blanc.
Hmm.
Our wine, this one, the Nava Blanc,
Oh yeah, that
is
was the white I had. That was
yeah,
really tasty.
it's a delicious wine, and
Very delicious.
it's made
Yeah.
from that grape,
Wow.
and it's extremely hardy. Like it can
Mm.
grow through anything, and it can face the cold winters. It's amazingly aromatic. It's a beautiful grape.
Hmm.
So we use it a lot, and it can every year you could make ice wine, you could make table wine, anything
Hmm.
with it. It's a fantastic grape.
What exactly happens aside from trying to survive the birds?
Yeah,
I mean it clearly goes through the summer, has heat, the sugars develop, but what happens end of summer up until middle of the winter to
right.
these and how does that affect the sugar content and all that?
Yeah.
And
No, so
also
it's
throw in what are
yeah.
other threats aside from birds?
Right. It
Mhm.
seems to be that what's happening during those months through the freezing and thawing,
Mhm.
because in this region, it's not like other places where it's just as soon as you get to November, it's like below zero forever. We go up
Mhm.
and down a little bit. We
Hmm.
play around zero. So I think what happens during those times,
0 Celsius, right?
Celsius, yeah,
Celsius.
yeah,
Okay.
we hover around 32 degrees Fahrenheit
Thank you.
above and below. I think during that time,
Mhm.
so we lose water and the
Mhm.
grape someday they shrivel a little bit
Mhm.
and they become more concentrated through that whole time
Oh wow.
through what everything's going on.
Uh-huh.
So there's 2 points of concentration for ice
Mhm.
wine. It's just hanging on the vine for so long and
Mhm.
losing some of its sort of intrinsic volume in moisture.
Mhm.
And then during the press at that cold temperature, we leave the water behind also. So there's multi-factors that are really
So the water
concentrating these
basically
flavors.
you don't have to filter out the water; it just freezes up.
Yeah, yeah.
You just like push it
No,
away.
we just press it, and it's just like we call it what's left behind in the press. We call it the puck because when you
Ah.
take it out, it's a thing like this big, and it's solid ice.
Wow, that is really
Pretty
neat.
amazing. Yeah, but
Um,
it's also expensive, by the way,
mhm,
because the yield for ice wine is
mhm,
like tremendously low compared to a regular wine. So
mhm,
if you would like, let's say you had a vineyard
mhm,
and you said, I'm going to create wine from this vineyard in the fall, like a normal table wine, right?
mhm,
Let's call that 100% yield.
mhm,
So if you want to do this, take that same vineyard and turn it into ice wine, you're
mhm.
going to get somewhere around 15% of the
Oh,
volume.
wow.
We sometimes call it, especially the yellow stuff, liquid gold. It's very expensive to make.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. I saw a question there if we want
Yeah, the
to.
puck. I actually was kind of thinking like, do you set it
Yeah.
aside? Do you have it ornamentally to survive the rest of the winter? What do you do with that puck?
So we have a lot of it left over at the end.
Mhm.
We have to stack them up onto trailers and take them off somewhere. And we try
Really?
to, yeah.
I just figure you just set them aside because it's just basically water and it'll just
Well, there's
melt.
also there's also the skins of the grape and whatever the
Oh,
seeds and the pulp. So
uh-huh.
it's not only ice that's left behind.
Okay. And I mean, I guess you would use that for composting or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
so we try to take our organic waste and
Hmm.
take it out into one of the open spaces that we have
Hmm.
and mix it together with other organic matter, some manure and stuff, and create a compost that we can then use in the vineyards.
Wow.
We're
We,
working on doing our
mm,
best to go organic.
mm,
Um, we hired this year an amazing vineyard manager,
hmm.
and he's doing wonders for us. But we want
Wow.
to we want to go organic,
Hmm.
and it'll take a bit of a
It's a
process for
process.
us, but that's our plan.
Hey there, I wanted to see how you're enjoying the episode so far. If you have any feedback, comments, questions, anything, please let me know. And also, if you have topics as well as potential guests, including, who knows, maybe yourself, please let me know. Feel free to reach out to me at drew@jewishdrinking.com. Thank you, and now back into the show. You said you started 2014. When did you start doing the ice wines?
I believe it was 2016, if I remember correctly.
2016.
Yeah, might have been 2015, but yeah.
Okay, so 6 or 7 years you've been producing ice wines.
Yeah, but we haven't done it every year. It's especially before we had our own facility.
Mm-hmm.
It's next to impossible to produce kosher ice wine in someone else's facility. Like you have to really have a very good relationship, and you have to have people that are willing to let us Jews operate a bunch of equipment that normally no one else but farmers operate. Like it's a very difficult process.
Let me ask you. Equipment side. You're saying like the wood stuff as opposed to steel, or what special equipment?
Well, there's like it's a very different process, and you have to use, like, in one facility there'll be something like 10 to 15 presses, and these have to be filled, and like you have to have a system of dumping these frozen grapes into these, and then when it's finished, you have to remove them. You have to remove the basket. You have to get that puck out. You have to break it up and press it again. And there's quite dangerous things that are being used to break up the puck, and it's very. It doesn't look like, it looks more like farm work than it does like winery work. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And the way that farmers are, they drive their tractors, they drive these things, and they don't want city folk touching their stuff and getting in there.
Well, wait. So with the ice wine, you're saying this is for, I guess I'm trying to tease out how much is the kosher piece of it and how much is the ice wine production piece of it?
Well,
that the equipment is unique or special too.
It's just the ice wine part.
So they're not used to seeing ice wine production or harvesting.
No, like they have their systems to make it. The challenge is to find people who, first of all, to find Jews who are able to operate tractors and forklifts and all this equipment. You know what I'm saying? Right?
It's already narrowing.
And then to find growers and pressers who are willing to allow people to come in and basically take over their facility.
Okay, that narrows it down.
It's not easy. Yeah, it's difficult.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really interesting. So how many vintages, how many years of ice wine production have you done overall then?
Yeah, so I think we've done, I would say either 4 or 5. The most recent being, I see we have a certified forklift driver who's going to come help us. Okay, let's talk.
Well, he'll come on for the Q&A. But
right. Well, I think we've done about 4 or 5. I think that's a good. The most recent was 2021.
So then let me ask you availability. I guess distribution. How widely available are the? I know you have the other wines like the Vidal Blanc wine, which was incredible, and the ice wines are definitely a special treat. How widely available is the distribution imprint of at least the ice wines? We can talk about your products in general.
So it's funny you should say that, because the company went through a bit of a transition just within the last 2 years.
Pandemic?
What?
Pandemic?
No, actually.
Oh, it had nothing to do with the pandemic. It was just during the pandemic.
Yeah. Okay. I got a couple of new business partners and investors. And so we kind of really switched the path of the company, and we, instead of working out of a non-kosher winery and having our mashgichim and our tanks and everything, so we now bought a few vineyard properties. We have over 100 acres of vineyard now.
Oh wow.
And we're building facilities and working on this. And so during that time, we used to be distributed in America, and we kind of sort of took about, I would say, a year or so off. And we're right now sort of reinventing our United States distribution.
Okay.
And we hope to have the products out there and available ASAP.
Uh,
Definitely, hopefully before Pesach. Yes, I
Okay.
said definitely, hopefully, but you know what I mean.
The goal is Pesach.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay, that's good. And what's the overall lineup? Of course, we've been talking a lot about these ice wines, which certainly are really distinct product, really special. But I also had access to the Vidal Blanc.
right,
How many other products do you put out there?
right. So the way that we're trying to work going forward is
Mhm.
we have these two semi-sweet wines. The one that you
Mm.
had, the
Mhm.
Nava Blanc,
The Vidal Blanc, yeah.
and it's called the name is Nava. It's named after my niece, by the way, Nava.
Oh, neat.
And then we
Nice.
have a Nava Ruby. So we have a
Uh-huh.
white and a red
Uh-huh.
semi-sweet wine,
Oh, wow.
and they're very nice to drink, easy
Mhm.
drinking.
Mhm.
They're some of the other sweet wines that you find in the kosher market. They're like more like a heavy wine, like a heavy
Mhm.
red wine
Mhm.
that they added sugar to. These ones are sort of lighter in in
In
general.
body? Yeah.
Yeah, I like a little lighter in body,
Mhm.
more easy to drink. I feel personally like it lends itself better to a sweet wine
Mm.
when it's a bit lighter, personally. So they're fantastically drinkable. So that's the two
Mhm.
semi-sweets.
Mm.
Then we have now three ice wines,
Mhm.
um, and we're making another couple. Whatever. We have a bunch of ice wines:
Mhm.
Vidal, Gewürztraminer,
Mhm.
Riesling,
Mhm.
Cab Franc coming up this coming year.
Oh, wow.
Um, and that's the ice wines.
Mhm.
Then this year we're producing for the third time a vintage of Riesling,
Mm.
and it'll be an off-dry Riesling, a little bit sweet Riesling,
Mhm.
which is going to be fantastic this year. It's looking amazing.
Mhm.
And then we have two dry red wines that are going to be bottled, God willing, within the next 6 months that have been aging for 2 years now
Mm.
from an amazing vintage. They're going to be for sure the best red wines that we've produced to date
Mm.
from one of the best seasons that have ever happened in the region.
That's very
And
exciting.
we had a distributor taste them recently,
Mhm.
and they were very, very happy with them. And
Mm.
they said they should be priced very high. They're
Mm.
expensive, good wines, but
Nice.
we're going to try and get them in at we want to produce wines that are reasonably priced
Mhm.
but high quality. That's
That's
kind of
great.
what we're trying to do. Yeah.
So, but as of now, for at least America, so your wines are currently available in Canada, but not so available in America. But hopefully by Pesach they will be.
That's what
America.
that's what I'm
Okay.
hoping. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very neat. And one other question before I open up to
Yeah.
Ryan. One other question, which is how, when do you start this, your own area, your own land, for lack of a better term, the estate, the lands, when does
Yeah.
that start?
So we
Or are
have the
you already
properties.
transitioning into that?
No, we have the properties. We've been farming them for a little over a year,
Mm-hmm.
but to build the facilities are a little bit they're not really like when you picture yourself going to a winery on a
Mm-hmm.
vineyard, so you have an aesthetically pleasing building and it's a nice place to go. We're
It's a
not
farm. It's a
right
farm that's in
now.
need of improvements.
Right now, we're a farm with a building to make the wine in,
Okay.
and we're working on the rest. To
It's a start.
yeah,
Okay. All right,
yeah.
great.
That's
All
going to
right.
take time though.
Hello. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to break in again and see if hopefully you're enjoying it. And in the past, I've asked if anybody has any ideas of what Jewish drinking can do beyond the show, beyond different things we can do. But we have the added benefit, the added bonus that Jewish drinking is now an officially recognized 501c3 organization by the IRS. So that means it is now tax deductible if you want to make donations, and we can see what we can do, what new things we can do. So I'm always open, and you are welcome to email me, to reach out to me at drew@jewishdrinking.com. Hopefully you reach out to me, and I'm always open to questions, ideas, suggestions, anything you might have. So please feel free to reach out to me, and thank you. And now back into the show.
We kind of took a journey. I can't remember the order that we went in, but basically we took the lightest to the darkest in
Mhm.
color
Yeah.
is how we decided to line it up.
Right.
And there was so much overlap, but they were all stunningly different. One thing that I did notice, and this is an immaturity in my palate, we all kind of gave our tasting notes on the wines blind, just what our thoughts were. And we had some overlap. Interestingly, we all kind of picked up some almond flavors and some fruits. Then we read the back of the bottles and the tasting notes on the back of the bottles, and none of us got any of the what was it? Tropical
flavors.
Fruits, the tropical flavors. What are we missing in that description? Because
By the way, we got like peach, apricot. We got stuff in that area.
Yeah, we got a lot of that stuff, but the tropical flavors, none of us came forward with on our own volition.
Right.
But they were prominently featured on each of the bottles. So I'm just a little curious about that. Is that
Who's
a
creating
more
the
mature
copy?
palate?
Yeah.
Is it creative copy, or is that a more mature palate, or are we just missing something in our vocabulary?
Let me ask you: Did you taste it again after you saw those notes?
Yeah.
Yes, we did both.
Still no.
Yeah,
we first tasted them. We saw the notes, and then we tasted them. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we picked up. I think we picked up some of it after reading it.
Right.
Yeah.
So then the question is, was it real or not?
I'm gonna piggyback on Ryan's question/comment, which is
Sure.
the first two. If we're going in from lower to higher ABV, even though they're 0.5% off,
Right.
the first two I would say in a similar sort of range. The last one, definitely a different flavor characteristic.
Right.
We all enjoyed that the best out of the trio.
Probably the Vidal you're talking about, right?
It was.
Yeah. The Vidal, because I remember there was like a Riesling, Gewürztraminer, and then
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting. Maybe I'll try to like address both of those comments if I can. We'll see. But definitely the Gewürztraminer and the Riesling, they're from the noble varieties. They're a more sort of refined wine, right? And the nuances are a lot more nuancy.
Okay.
Right. And Vidal.
Can I slip in?
Yeah.
It is super duper fascinating tasting those wines, because normally when you have those in like table wine varieties, they're like delicate, they're light.
Yeah.
This is so much more potent, sugary, flavorful. It was such a wildly different experience than any of us had experienced.
It's the grape. It's the concentrate. It's the essence of the grape. You're really getting all that flavor power packed into one sip.
Wow. Yeah.
So for sure. But the Vidal, it's much more aromatic. It has these wild, powerful flavors, and so it's not as, I'm going to use a couple words. It's not as nuanced. It's not as snobby. Right? It's not a vinifera grape, but it is unbelievable. It's for ice wine. It like as soon as you nose it for the first time, like you've never got such a powerful nose from a wine ever until you a Vidal ice wine. Wow. It's just it's amazing, right?
That was a special experience.
Yeah, that's something you'll notice with regards to the creative copy, let's call it. And to be honest, I didn't make this label, and I'm not sure who did, but there's a lot of overlap, in my opinion, in the nose and on the palate. When you start sensing things like peach and apricot, right, and stone fruits, there's a point where there's overlap with other things like pineapple, sort of, and maybe going into guava, those type of things, where they sort of, there's a continuum of those fruit flavors, and I think it could be a maturity of palate. It could be that just temperature. Could be it takes some time. You leave it out longer. If you leave it out for an hour, you're going to taste something and smell something different than you did when you first opened it.
So to that point, I noticed, and again, I don't know if it was saturating my senses by trying 3 wines right in a row, or what I thought was the wines, they're so aromatic when we first poured them, but it seemed almost like those aromatics are very volatile. It seemed to, within 5 minutes, be a completely different wine on the nose. Not as much on the palate, but on the nose, it was a totally different wine. Very quickly. In a way that a red wine may take an hour after you decant it and it's starting to open up or bloom a bit. But these were like, took a sip, sat down, chatted a few words about it, and then went back to it and went, "Oh, Drew, did you pour a different glass?" Like,
Right.
and specifically on the nose. So I don't know if that's something that. And again, was it we dulled our senses by having three wines back to back, or is that kind of a characteristic of these really concentrated aromatic whites?
Yeah, for sure. You also have the issue of temperature, meaning that if have you ever took a red wine out of the fridge?
Mhm.
Someone put it in by accident. You take a dry red wine out of the fridge and you taste it, and it's like there's nothing there.
It's flat.
And so you let it warm up a little bit. In that time, from when you took it out of the fridge and it gets to room temperature, it's going to go through a whole lifetime. You know? And so I don't know what temperature you serve the ice wine at, but it could come, put it in the freezer for a half an hour and take it out, or leave it in the fridge for hours. From the time you start and it starts to warm up, it's gonna go through a lifetime of tasting, and things are gonna open up, and other things are gonna shut down a little bit. So you'll have a lot of citrus off the beginning, and some of the other tropical fruits will come out as it warms up a tiny bit. It's like a journey. Yeah.
Rabbi Gislason, this has been fantastic. This has been very insightful. I learned a lot about ice wines, amongst other things. And before we go, is there anything you would like to promote?
Yeah, sure. You can check out our wines at tzafona.com, tzafona.com. It's been a huge pleasure to be with you here.
Oh, thank you.
And a great time. And also, by the way, if I can promote the other side of what I do,
what else
you can check out our YouTube channel at Breslov Thornhill. BRESLOV THORN HILL.
Actually, you know what? Quick question.
Yeah.
Do you ever see any interplay between Breslov Chassidut and wine? Is there? I'm sure 1,000 people have asked you, if not 5,000, but
right. No, a lot, because it's not the greatest advertising for what we're doing here today. But Rabbi Nachman was very, very strong about people not drinking to get drunk, and really not drinking too much alcohol.
Interesting.
So with Breslov and wine, it's all about balance. And there's a lot to say about it, but maybe for another time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what? We've done stuff on the Lubavitch Chassidut, but never on Breslov Chassidut. So definitely a potential topic for the future.
Okay, amazing.
All right. Rabbi Gislason, this has been amazing. This has been great. Thank you so much. And l'chaim.
Chaim.